In this video, we will show you how to replace your radiator on this Jeep Wrangler with a 3.6 liter engine. This will be located across the front of your engine compartment. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Make sure you're in a safe area to work on your vehicle. Once you've confirmed that, we're going to make our way under the hood on the passenger side and we're looking for our battery. We want to disconnect the negative battery terminal from the battery and set it aside. We'll use a 10mm to loosen our mounting nut. We'll take this off of here, a quick inspection, and set it aside. Let's make sure that's making no contact. Continuing from there, we'll make our way up towards the front of the vehicle to the radiator cap. You want to confirm that your cooling system is cool to the touch. You never want to open the cooling system when it's hot. When you do go to open this, push down, turn it counterclockwise, and lift it up and away from your face just in case there's any pressure. Confirm that the cap is still in good reusable condition. Typically, it's a good idea to replace these whenever you're replacing your radiator. Now let's make our way safely under the front of the vehicle. Under the front of the vehicle, you can see the bottom corner of the radiator on the passenger side here. This is where the drain's going to be. You can see that there's a wiring harness that leads directly under this, and I'm trying to prevent too much coolant from making its way on there, so I just have a small rubber hose that I'll put right on the very tip here. We'll continue on with our collection receptacle under this area, and we'll turn the drain plug counterclockwise until coolant starts coming out. Let that completely drain, and then we'll close this and continue on. We'll just let this finish draining. Now that the coolant has finished draining, we'll close the drain plug along the bottom of the radiator, and if you're using a small hose as a coolant diverter, you can remove that as well. Make sure you recycle all of your coolant properly. Make your way back into the engine compartment. We're going to remove the engine cover. For this, just carefully lift up along the front, and then you should be able to slide the rear out of position. Set that aside. Now we're going to start removing the air inlet tube from your throttle body. This should be held in place with an 8mm headed clamp. Go ahead and loosen that just enough that you can slide this away from the throttle body. After that, we'll continue on to two 10mm bolts making their way across the front of the vehicle. Slide the overflow hose out of the two clamps. We'll make our way all the way over to the upper air filter housing. This is held in place to the lower housing with 4 clips. There's one on each corner. One here, and making our way inboard, we have 2 more. Go ahead and remove your air filter. A quick inspection, we'll set that aside. And start lifting this up. As we pull it away, you're going to find that you have a hose making its way along the inboard side of the upper air filter housing. This should just tug right off of here. We'll give it a quick inspection afterward. Now moving down the inlet tube towards where the throttle body would be mounted, you should find an air temp sensor. We're going to disconnect this as well. For this, it has a small locking tab. Squeeze it in and pull this out of place. A quick inspection for corrosion. With that out of the way, let's pay attention to the lower air filter housing. For this, it's fairly simple to just give it a light tug straight up and out of here, and we'll set it aside. Quick inspection, you should have a couple tabs down along the bottom there. On the radiator, where your radiator cap should be, is where you're going to find your coolant overflow hose. That will make its way all the way across. We had already removed it from the hooks on the inlet tube, and it makes its way over to the overflow tank. We're going to remove the overflow tank and this hose from the vehicle. Up along the top of the overflow tank, you're going to find a small push clip that you need to remove the center to unlock, and then remove the outer portion to remove. That's what it looks like in the unlocked position. After a quick inspection, you can take hold of that tank, and we're going to lift it up and out of the engine compartment. We'll recycle that coolant and replace it in the end. Continuing with our trim tool, we're going to remove this upper plastic panel that makes its way across. You're going to find several push tabs to remove. For these ones, just make your way underneath the plastic panel and gently pry up. Once you've relieved that push pin, you should be able to finish pulling it out from the top. Repeat the process down the line. Slide the panel out of place. Along the top, driver's side of the radiator, you have your upper radiator hose. We're going to squeeze on this clamp. We'll carefully slide the hose out of place, and of course a quick inspection. If the hose looks like it's cracked or damaged, you have to go ahead and replace it. If you need to use a hose pick, be extremely careful not to cause any damage. We're just going to make our way around here, just breaking it free. There could still be coolant located inside the cooling system. You need to be extremely careful at all times. We're going to perch this upward because this upper hose does have a small dip, and it's common for it to hold some coolant. Let's make our way all the way across to the lower radiator hose. Same process, we'll squeeze the clamp, slide it out of the way, remove the hose from the radiator. We'll just switch up our tools for this. There's a little bit less room for access in here. Once again, be very careful not to lose any coolant from here. You don't want to dump it out onto the ground. We'll move straight up from there. We have the electrical connector for our electric cooling fan. It has a locking tab. Squeeze that in and separate this. A quick inspection on each end for corrosion. This looks fine. Now moving just under that area, we can start dislodging the cooling fan. You're going to find on each side of the cooling fan an 8mm headed bolt. Go ahead and remove the pair. Take hold of your cooling fan and we'll lift it up and out of position. Quick inspection of that and we'll set it aside. With the cooling fan out of the way, we're going to start removing our front grille. This should be fairly easy overall. You're going to have 6 push clips holding it in place, one here, making their way all the way over towards the other side. Using our trim tool, now you have some movement from along the top. We're going to carefully grab along the lower edges of these and start tugging it away. But do be careful, you have wiring harnesses leading along each side to your lamp assemblies. Let's have a look along the back side. We have our wiring harnesses leading to the back side of those lamps. For these, just go ahead and take hold of the entire thing, give it a quick twist, and slide it out of position. An inspection of the bulb, set it aside. Set your grill aside. With that out of the way, we're going to start dislodging this. On the driver's side, you're going to find 2 10mm headed bolts that you have to remove. Do not remove these lines from this unit. As you make your way over towards the driver's side, you have an 8mm. Behind that area, you have your AC condenser. The AC condenser is held to the radiator with 4 8mm headed bolts. There's one on each corner. One up here, one all the way down in this corner here, and then pretty much the same thing on the other side of the AC condenser. To remove these, I'm going to use an 8mm headed ratchet wrench. That makes it easiest for me to get into this area. So that next one's down inside this area. Now let's repeat the process on the other side. I'm going to start with the lower one because it's a little bit more difficult to get to, and then I'll get the easier one up along the top. Now we should be able to take hold of this. You should be able to move it around a little bit, essentially just breaking it free from the radiator. Let's pause on the front of the radiator, and now we'll move back inside the engine compartment. We're going to start dislodging the radiator. To do that, you'll find that you have 2 10mm headed bolts. There's one on each upper corner. Now we can move the radiator around quite a bit, but we're also going to dislodge the power steering reservoir. It's held in place with a 10mm bolt. Just set that aside, doesn't have to go very far. Once you have that out of the way, we can make our way right down along this area. You're going to find a wiring harness mounted to the radiator. You can use a trim tool or just a small prying device, and we'll pull this out of place. There we are. Make our way all the way over the radiator towards the driver's side now. Deep down in this area, you're going to find an 8mm headed bolt. We have to try to remove this. This is easiest if you flex the radiator towards the engine a little bit, obviously being very careful not to cause any damage. Continuing with our 8mm ratchet wrench, we can start removing this bolt. Now with that bolt out of the way, we'll move straight down the radiator, and you're going to find another wiring harness that's held in place to the radiator. You know what to do. We'll just go ahead and carefully pry this out of place. Next, you'll have to move into the driver's side wheel well. You don't necessarily have to remove your wheel, assuming you have enough room to make your way all the way down in here. In this area, you're going to find where 2 lines make their way across the driver's side of the radiator, and they're held in place with a bracket and an 8mm headed mounting bolt. We'll remove the bolt and that outer mounting bracket. Use an angled pick and pull it out of place from the radiator. Take hold of the radiator and carefully start removing it from the engine compartment. You may have to wiggle it around a little bit and maneuver it around things. There it is, friend. Let's have a quick look at our original radiator. There's a few more things that we have to take off of this. On each side of the radiator, you're going to find that you have 2 rubber mounts. There's 2 along the top, and then 2 located just below them. As for the upper ones, you just take hold of them and slide them out towards the side. As you make your way to the lower ones, located just below them, just go ahead and take hold of those and slide them straight down and off. If you have to use something to pry them off, you can do that as well. A quick inspection of these. Repeat the process on the other side of the radiator. Now you can set your radiator aside for recycling. Okay friend, let's prepare our brand new radiator for installation. After confirming everything matches up just as it should, we can install our rubber mounts. We'll start with the bottom area. For this, you want to try to feel along on the plastic mount on the radiator itself. You should find that there's this flat area along the inboard side, and if you are looking at the rubber mount, you can see that it also has an area that matches up for that. Go ahead and slide that right up and into position. Once you have it bottomed out there, we'll continue on just above it with our upper mount. As for these, you want to pay attention to the orientation. You can see that there's a metal washer on one side, and on the other side you can't see that. It's only rubber really. We want to have the metal side facing towards what would be the front of the vehicle. We'll slide this right in here as far as we can. Repeat the process on the other side of the radiator. Let's get this in the vehicle. As we're bringing the radiator into position, you want to pay attention to the body of the vehicle. You're going to find the area for the lower mounts. There's one here and there's one all the way over on the other side. When you go to bring the radiator into position, you want to pay attention to each one of the air baffles, which are located on each side of the engine compartment. There's going to be several slots in them, but the area that we're really paying attention to at this point is the larger rectangular holes that are on each of them. Looking at the front of the radiator, this is where the mount with that rubber portion will sit through, and then right down into the body of the vehicle in that lower port. As you go to install your brand new radiator, you want to be extremely careful not to cause any damage to the cooling fins on the radiator, your AC condenser, or the other cooler located just in front of it. Just have to come down at an angle. Things are going to have to move around a little bit. Just going to slide that cooler forward. There's our rectangular slot. Just going to see if we can get that down and in there. One of the hardest parts, just getting everything aligned. This right in there. Okay, we've got one side lined up. Let's do the same on the other side of the radiator. Just get this in there. Once you feel as though you have the radiator in the proper placement as far as the lower mounts are concerned, we're making our way back inside the driver's side wheel well. Paying attention along the side of the radiator, we have those 2 lines that make their way across. They were held in place with a bracket and an 8mm headed mounting bolt. Once you feel as though you have both of those aligned and pressed into their proper position, we can install that bracket. As for the bolt, start it in and snug it up. You can see that this one's already in its groove. It's pretty much sitting right in there. That one looks good. The installation of this bracket will go approximately in this position. Once you have that in place, take hold of the lines, try to remove them from the side of the radiator. They should not come out of place. Making our way back inside the engine compartment, we're staying on the same side of the radiator, the driver's side, but this time if we were to make our way deep down in here, we have the area where we need to install our 10mm bolt holding these lines to the side of the radiator. Just going to try to get this down there with my magnet, and I'll try to bring it in with my fingers. Alright, that's nice and snug. Let's make our way down from there. Heading towards the bottom, we'll stop approximately in the middle. We have the area for the wiring harness that we need to press into position. Go ahead and press it in, make sure that's secure. Along the front of the radiator, it's time to pay attention to our AC condenser. That condenser has 4 8mm headed mounting bolts that hold it to the radiator itself. We have one in each corner, so we'll just go ahead and start them in. Once they're all started in, snug them up. There's that one, still loose. Let's continue on, same process for all others. Okay, I've got all of them started in. Since this is the last one that I was starting in, I'm just going to go ahead and snug it up while I'm still in this position. Let's move along to the other 3. That's tight. Let's get our next cooler in place and we can start on the mounting hardware just like before. Start it all in and then you can snug it up. Let's get this next cooler in place. Start in your 2 10mm headed mounting bolts here, just along the driver's side. $8mm headed bolt over here. All right, let's snug them up. Let's start securing our radiator in place. Get that one started in. We'll start in the other one and snug them up. Now that the radiator is secured, we're going to pay attention to that drain plug on the bottom passenger side of the radiator. It should already come closed, but you want to make sure it is, so we'll just use some pliers and try turning this clockwise, ensuring it's properly secured. Oh yeah, that's tight. Let's re-secure our power steering reservoir in this area. Start in the mounting bolt, snug it up. We're getting ready to install our cooling fan. Along the bottom of the radiator, you have 2 small hooks. That's for the lower portion of the fan to slide into. Bring this down. We're aligning it with the hooks. Press it down. Continue on with your 2 upper mounting bolts. You'll have 1 on each side. Let's move along to our electrical connector. We're going to take this and we'll press it right in. Listen for a click from that. Make sure it's properly secured. Let's move under there. We have our lower radiator hose. Press that onto the radiator as far as possible. When you're reinstalling the clamp, attempt to get it into the same exact positioning. No matter what, you need to be able to see hose on both sides of the clamp. Attempt to pull the hose off of the radiator. It should not slide off. If the clamp isn't strong enough, replace it with a new one. Let's continue to the upper radiator hose. Same process. Press that on all the way as far as we can. Reinstall the clamp. Get this plastic panel in. It should have 4 push clips holding it in place, making their way across. Just go ahead and press those right in. Move along to your coolant reservoir. On the forward side of the reservoir, you're going to have 2 locating tabs. Those tabs will slide into your cooling fan assembly. You can see one of the slots here, the other one's just directly down there below it. As you bring this into position, we're going to start nice and high, press it towards the fan, and then lock it down. Give it a wiggle to make sure it's properly secured on the bottom and the top. We'll continue on with that hose, making its way across the top area here, and it's going to end up at the radiator. Obviously, we still have the rest of the air intake to put across here, which will have those mounting clips. Along the top, you should have an area for 1 push clip holding this in. It really just keeps it from lifting up and down and falling out of place. Press in the outer portion, lock it in with the center. It's time for the lower air filter housing. We have those 3 tabs along the bottom. I just applied a thin amount of silicone paste here. Looking in the engine compartment of the vehicle, you can see the 3 rubber grommets for those areas to slide into. Just get this aligned, press it in. Continuing from there, we have our air filter. You want to make sure that you install this in the same direction that you had removed it. Let's grab that air inlet tube. For installing this, we're going to start with the air temp sensor right down along the bottom area. Just press it in. You want to listen for a click from that. Give it a tug, make sure it's secure. Continuing from there, we can take this and start bringing it down into position. We do have a hose that we'll be sliding on, but we can do that in a second. We'll get this aligned with the throttle body as we continue bringing it down. Just roll it right on down, making sure you do not cause any crimps on your coolant hose here. Swing this into position. We're not going to latch this in yet. Let's make our way all the way back over towards the throttle body. Make sure your air inlet tube is pressed all the way against the throttle body so it's completely seated, and then snug up your clamp, give it a light tug. You do not want any dirty or unmetered air making its way into the engine. Let's get the breather hose on here. Four clamps for the upper housing to the lower housing. Once again, there's 1 in each corner. Just go ahead and swing them right on over and latch them in. This one back here is the hardest one to get to. Slide our coolant tube in here. We've got the area for our 2 mounting bolts. Moving along, we've got our engine cover. If you were looking at the intake, you're going to find that you have 2 small hooks along the rear of it. And if you were looking at the engine cover itself, you're going to have the area for those hooks. We'll carefully bring this in, sliding it, and align the rest of our mounting points. After they're aligned, you can press this down into the locked position. Move along to installing the grille. Before we do, we'll have a quick look at the body of the vehicle. You can see the mounting slots across the bottom here. And if you were looking at the grille itself, along the bottom, you will have several tabs that need to align and get pressed in. Before we press them in, we also have the area for our bulbs to go into the back side of the lamps. So let's start with those. Just get this lined up. Twist to lock it in. Now we're trying to align those tabs across the bottom there. You can see them all through here. Swing the top up. Now we're going to give this a light tap in once you're sure everything's properly aligned. Along the top of the grille assembly, you'll have 6 push clips. Start in the outer portion, lock them in with the center. Just drive in the center there. Reconnect your negative battery terminal. Press that onto the battery as far as possible. Tighten your 10mm nut. Make sure this is secured. Try to Straighten that out a little bit. To fill the cooling system, you can do this several different ways. Two of the best ways, one of them would be using a funnel like this. Once you have your proper adapter, you put it on here, tighten it up, and then top this off with your manufacturer's specified coolant. Typically what you're going to find is that the coolant will make its way down and air bubbles will be making their way up. You'd want to continue this process until you don't see any more air. After that, you can go ahead and start up the vehicle. With the vehicle running, the water pump's going to be circulating. Once the thermostat opens up, the coolant should start flowing, and that'll circulate the rest of the air out of the system. As that's happening, coolant will continue going down, air will keep coming out. You want to continue this process until you're sure it's only coolant circulating and there's definitely no air. For me, I have a specialty tool that'll apply vacuum and we can easily check for leaks. With this tool, what I was doing is applying negative pressure or vacuum in the system. You could see it building up that vacuum pressure through the red zone, into the yellow, and then into the green. The green's exactly where we want to be. As you can tell, without having any vacuum continuously getting applied to this, it's holding pressure as it should. If this needle was dropping down, that would tell me that I have a leak someplace and we would want to fix that before we go ahead and add any coolant. I'm going to let this sit for approximately a minute and then we'll continue on by adding the manufacturer specified coolant. Now for my tool, I have the fill hose going into my coolant. Continuing from here, we're going to open up our valve and we'll be watching this start to drop. What we need to do is make sure we do not let this start sucking air out of the bottom of the jug. You definitely want to continue filling it with only coolant, otherwise you may find you have an air pocket. There we are. At this point, our cooling system should be filled. We'll remove our tool. Of course, we'll clean this accordingly. Typically, when you use a vacuum tool like that, you should not need to use a funnel. Just in case, you could do that. Go ahead and put the funnel in position, use some coolant in here approximately halfway, and then start up the vehicle. Let it run until you hear your cooling fans turn on. Now that we have that full, we're going to install the radiator cap. It's a good idea to have a new one. After you've completed filling the cooling system, make your way over to the coolant reservoir. You want to make sure you open this up and top it off with the manufacturer's specified coolant as well. Once you've completed that, go ahead and close the cap. Okay, friend, we finished the installation of our radiator. The next thing that you need to do is go ahead and run the vehicle for a short while and wait until you hear your cooling fan turn on. At that point, the thermostat should be opened up, coolant should be circulating, and you want to double check for leaks. After that, go ahead and close the hood and take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.